city's cap. A lot of the emissions estimates are based off of assumptions coming from those vehicle emission standards. So if California isn't allowed to set its own standards, emissions projections for the future will rise because cars will be less efficient, we'll pay more for gas, and that could affects the effectiveness of our climate action and adaptation plan too. So thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. Nothing more from me though, so that does it for the commissioners. Stan, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
Just that I just mentioned that council last meeting did appoint 2 new commissioners moving forward. So Sarah, who is with us this evening, as a member of the public, and then Jessica, and I apologize, the names are on the website. I don't remember the last names, my apologies. So, but the 2 new commissioners, and then the alternate currently is vacant. So they'll be doing another round next time they do that. I don't have a time frame for that either. So.
Thank you, Stan, and looking forward to having those new commissioners join us. That's great news. All right, so with that, we'll move on to our first opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on our agenda. We don't have all that much on the agenda today. So anything that's not on the agenda, please feel free to approach the dais, and we'll allow you to speak. I'll note too, we'll have additional public comment periods on each of the items on the agenda later on too.
Good evening, Alan Hirsch, Davis Lorax. On August 19th, the Urban Forest Plan, and potentially the privatization of the urban forest, street trees and people's homes, is on the City Council agenda. The City Council has a structural deficit. They've always talked about the pavement, and clearly now, talking to Stan, we have a structural deficit on the Urban Forest Plan. We've seen that reflected in the death of Jennifer Comey in Lido Park, and that happened even though 18 months before there was an increase in parks tax to maintain parks, but somehow that wasn't spent on maintaining the trees. The city has not done a good job on this, and I'm afraid that they will consider or even study privatizing the urban forest in front of people's homes. And that will basically increase the cost for the entire community, even though it will reduce the cost for the city as a short-term budget. It will reduce the quality of trees because people don't know and don't know, like privatizing healthcare, privatizing kids' schooling. Clearing the public schools and basically everyone take care of their own trees. It won't work very well, like paving the things. So we need to root out and stop this project to even consider privatizing trees now before it even gets a foothold in the ground. I urge you to attend August 19th, speak out against privatizing trees, against privatizing the urban forest, because it'll cause social equity problems. It'll reduce tree cover so people will be able to bicycle, or walk to bus stops, or walk. It'll basically increase social equity because richer neighborhoods where people will have money to pay for the trees, but the poor neighborhoods not. It's just bad. You can go and see in cities like West Sacramento and whatever, the poor neighborhoods have crummy trees. They privatize the trees, and this is what's happened. Please speak out now before the idea gets traction at the city council. Root it out before it even sets root. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for the public comment. And that will close this public comment period. And we can move on to our regular items. So we'll have, I'll ask Stan to just introduce this regular item. We'll then open it up for public comment, and then we'll move on to discussion.
Okay, so not much of an intro, but continuation is in essence from last month that we chatted about this. I think the idea was go back and kind of narrow the focus of the document from a commission perspective, potentially as noted in the first or second paragraph, use of this document toward the general plan update. So Michelle and Kira basically took that guidance from the commission and kind of recrafted a few things here, and that's in front of you tonight to discuss and potentially either discuss and continue or discuss and potentially make some motions related to the documents.
Thank you. And Michelle, I was wondering, so we've got a few commissioners here today who weren't able to join us last week. I was wondering if you wanted to kind of open this discussion up with any kind of like overview, and then we'll switch to public comment on this item. Or if you'd just like to roll right into the discussion after public comment, I'll leave that to you.
Sure, I can give a little background. So the background is that Kira and I were both a part of the National Natural Resources Commission, and we recognized that there was a real lack of understanding of environmental justice and a real desire for more participation by people. And so we were set into a subcommittee to develop some kind of something to help us with that. And so that's kind of what we came up with. This has now been altered a little bit more to be our Climate and Environmental Justice Commission framework instead of natural resources, of course. But the whole idea is really, I almost want to say it comes down to participation by affected groups of people. And so it's really about process. It's about, as things come to the commission, let's consider those people that are affected, how they're affected, take their input, use the input, and follow through with it. And I think that's really a good summary in a sentence. So hopefully you all have had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate that. At this point, let me just pause before I get carried away with myself here, and I'd like to open it up to public comment in case there's any members of the public that would like to speak on this item. You can feel free to approach the dais, and then after we close public comment, we'll go to discussion.
Environmental justice. The poor, the less advantaged, live in developments, apartment complexes, trailer park homes and whatnot. And the way we get trees and environmental stuff is to enforce the law. And we aren't enforcing the law. There's no enforcement of tree regulations in parking lots, in trailer parks and whatever. There's no standards that go forward. So you can talk about all these great development standards in the future, but basically until there's enforcement, it's all fake. And I should say the enforcement is actually free, because when you develop something, all the inspections to make sure it's done right are paid for by the developer. People don't realize that. So the city can cry all it wants about money, but when they don't enforce planning standards on new development, that's on the city, because the city has money, they just bill it back to the developer. So unless we address enforcement, this is all kind of nice to have. City has to get some cojones and actually enforce the law on the developers, and it's not happening. Look at the parking lots. Even when there's regulations that can be enforced. Look at the tree ordinance, which would protect the trees. We haven't rewritten that in 20 years, and there's no one wants to do that. Until we enforce things, it's just like, because private homeowners can take care of themselves at some level, but the people who live in house and house count on the city oversight on private developers who run the places. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public want to comment? All right, with that, we'll close this period of public comment and kind of open the discussion on the environmental justice and equity framework. And yeah, just to emphasize, I guess maybe to recap, I guess part of the discussion that we had last session was, as Michelle kind of providing the overview, what is environmental justice, what does it mean to individual commissioners, and what does it mean for our role as a commission? So we discussed that a little bit and felt that, or my memory of the conversation at least, is that we felt that having this established framework in place would allow us to kind of better do our jobs, understand what that environmental justice component meant of our commission, but it would also allow us to then maybe do some advocacy to other commissions or advocacy towards the city council, both in with respect to items that are coming up to us and as a general resource to other commissions. So with this environmental justice and equity framework, we asked Michelle and Kira to update it based on a few of our recommendations. And so at this time, we'd be looking to either potentially adopt this as our kind of working definition of environmental justice or working framework that we would then put into place kind of on our own initiative as projects arise into the future, or if as folks have read through it, or as we discuss it today, if you have specific edits that you'd like to make or changes you'd like to make, we'll also have time for that today, and we can discuss, specific places in this framework that you'd like to discuss as well. So with that, I think we'll go maybe we'll go kind of down the line again with commissioners. Any clarifying questions you have, any points of discussion you want to bring up, any kind of, how you see this being used or how you'd like to see it being used. I think it's all fair game for now. We'll decide on the kind of free-flowing discussion for here. And then at the end of that, we'll see if we have any motions of adopting this framework, of bringing this framework towards the council, anything that we see fitting here. So start on the right side.
I just want to say that I've come to this pretty late, and coming from the tree commission, this is something that those of you that were part of the other commission that we joined with have been working on this a long time. So I really want to commend everyone for pulling this together, and trying to describe this is challenging. But I really like the fact that you've given so many references, and I think the questions that you pose, those are the guiding sort of steps that will be really helpful to the people that will be addressing this concern. So, what does environmental justice mean, and how can they apply it to the work that they're doing? So, I commend you for the work that you did. And so I was sort of the first read on this, and I thought it was as clear as this kind of thing could possibly be. And I really thank you for the questions. I think that was a great one.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I want to just first recognize the amount of time and effort that went into this from Michelle and Kira. I know this has been in the works for a while, and it kind of got put on the shelf for a little bit as we had some transition with the commissions, but I'm glad that we revived it, because I do think that, maybe there's a little bit of a built-in assumption that if you're, interested in joining the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission, you have a sense of that to start with, and that's likely true for the most part, but I think giving ourselves a shared framework to analyze things and kind of start from a shared definition of what we're really considering and thinking about as we go through the work that we do as a commission is really important. I also like the kind of bibliography, so to speak, or the resources there, because you can kind of go as deep into this as you'd like to, and I think it's a really good set of resources as well from a kind of a good mix of state and federal agencies, though we recognize that federal agencies aren't necessarily as interested in environmental justice as they should be. Structurally, I think framing this as questions to ask about projects and to ask about initiatives is the right way to go. And I really don't have a lot of questions about the document itself. I have one kind of minor, it might even be a nitpick, but I do want to bring it up. I should have highlighted it here, but let me find. Under 3B for the equitable impacts analysis, we have kind of a brief definition of what a disproportionate burden is. And we just have groups that are impacted at a much higher percentage of rate than other groups. And I recognize it can be difficult to put a specific number on that, but when I see a term like much higher percentage, that's very much open to interpretation. Maybe that's okay, but it is, on my read of this, it kind of caught my eye as, okay, what does that mean in that context? And then, moving from the document itself and into what we as a commission do with this document, or what our next steps look like, I do think that it's important that we have some dialogue with council on this. I think it's pretty core to what we're doing, and I think we should be in alignment with council, or at least this iteration of council, on kind of what this means, or at least have some input on, does council have any feedback for us? And I really like the idea of this being part of an orientation packet for new commissioners and anyone else who would be interested in the topic. And that's another reason why I think getting council's input on it would be important, because, like I said, if we can start from a shared definition of these things, we're going to have more productive conversations, we're going to be more effective. So the more we can kind of get everybody on a similar page here from the top down, I think it's going to be beneficial for the entire community. So I might have a few more thoughts based on what others say, but those are my initial thoughts. So thank you.
Can I borrow that? Yeah. I want to take one more reading through it. I glanced at it earlier, but I would, if you can come back to me, and I'll just look through it again. Yeah.
So I'll echo the praise. I think this is a wonderful step forward, and you've done fabulous work, and I thank this. But I do have a couple of clarifying questions, I guess, that we would say that merge into being concerns. One has to do with, and Jordan was alluding to this a little bit, I think, the definition of affected groups. Over the years, I've encountered a number of people who have talked about Davis as being a highly segregated area with slum areas and wealth areas and vast differences, and then a number of other people who have commented on Davis being so incredibly homogeneous that there's no distinctions whatsoever. And I sort of, the question is then, how are these groups going to be, like Jordan was saying, low income? I mean, you know, if somebody earns $30,000, is that different from somebody who earns $35,000, or are you talking about 10,000 versus 100,000? It could get all bogged down if we make too fine distinctions and so on. The second question has to do, again, with implementation in terms of how these criteria are going to be investigated, shall I say. Are we anticipating that any project is going to require 5 years of research to gather vast data and so on? Are we talking about this being sort of an orientation and people to sort of casually sit down and give their thoughts about these things without any research? What is required in terms of this implementation? And I'll sort of back that up by saying I've been reading lately a number of books and studies that have been observing that over time in our society, our concern to prevent bad outcomes has been so pervasive that we've created structures which prevent any good outcomes also. And I'm hoping that we can be somewhere in between where we allow good projects at the risk of possibly some bad things happening or something that we're not purists. So that's sort of the basis for my questions about that. But as a starting point and as a framework and an orientation, I think this is outstanding, and you know, we've raised all the right questions in here.
Yeah, those are great questions. You know, one of the things that you raised was like, how do you define an affected group? You know, and what does that mean? And I think that's something that I've struggled with too, with this concept in different areas as well. I think what I like about the framework as it is because it's taken it hasn't tried to define that. It means that sort of as commissioners, each of us can sort of bring our own definition to the table. So if, for instance, like your example, you know, was like income-based. Income-based is how you want to look at it. You can look at does a project, you know, impact folks from some part of the income spectrum that you feel are underrepresented, whereas someone else might say, well, I'm a little bit more concerned with, is this impacting people who have pre-existing health conditions? You know, is it a project near, or is it a project near a senior center or something? What that might be have a more vulnerable population to air pollution or something like that. So that's been, I guess that isn't an answer to your how do we define that, but I mean to say that it's, I think the intention is to keep it broad enough that we can each bring our own definition to whatever project happens to be in front of us. But that, I don't know, Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that piece or the other questions raised?
Yeah, I think I've got some answers that might combine a lot of the things that I've been hearing. Just starting with Angie saying that the questions are the key, and I think that that's exactly what it's intended. A lot of this other stuff is just explaining what it is or giving you references, because many references as much as possible, because it's dynamic and it changes and people are taking websites down, like the EPA took down their definitions, right? So it's meant to just be a lot of background, and I want to say that it's interesting that you thought that maybe people coming on would know what environmental justice is, and I'll tell you that that's not true. It's absolutely not true. When I joined NRC, that was definitely not the case. Most people did not know what it is. So it's actually kind of a sign, to me, it's a little bit of a positive sign that you think that people would, and so I think that's cool. But, so yeah, the framework, I'll say in general, is meant to be a process thing. It's meant for you all to think about these questions in a personal way, in what you know about Davis way, and think about who is being affected and have those people been brought into the conversation. And it's meant to point out, have you paid particular attention to low income, not defining exactly what that means, because it's kind of, I mean, yes, we could get into specific territory defining it by the government standards, but it's really about Davis, right? It's some kind of proportion of Davis. And so, yeah, so it's a process for you all to think to yourselves as something comes through, and to ask staff as they bring things to you, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Show me the numbers. How did you get people to participate? That kind of thing. And so then on that note, I want to say that I know the staff, or the city, is working on an environmental justice element for the general plan, and I have not actually seen it myself, but I would assume that a lot of what it has in it will feed into this, and so then staff will be a little more educated on what all this is and be able to bring you all more answers probably than they have been able to in the past. So I'm hoping all that sort of integrates and fits together well. I might even suggest either, if you decide to adopt this tonight, just kind of revisit it once that environmental justice element has been completed. And also to probably comment on that environmental justice element to see that they've incorporated this. So yeah, what does it require? Do you ask people to spend 5 years making sure everybody's involved? I hope not. I hope that it's more, on our scale and what we can do as volunteers, but just questioning staff as they bring projects to you about what they've done. And just making sure that they're thinking along these lines, I guess. And affected groups, I think, is the same thing we did. We tried to keep all of this broad enough, because at the time we were writing it, we were really hopeful that this could be implemented in all of our commissions, and it's still kind of a hope. And so a lot of things are broad, even like defining a project. What's a project? Well, whatever gets brought to you, basically, or whatever you all conceive of, something that you want to bring to staff, can go both ways. So, and if we haven't succeeded in that, definitely open to changing it. And I would love to see this go before the city council to get widespread public opinion on it, to change it for the better.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up thoughts or questions you'd like to raise right now?
Well, I'll just acknowledge that I might have misunderstood who this is for. If it's for citizens to think about these things, that's good. And if it's for the commissions where they think about it, but they don't necessarily have to do vast research and so on, that's good. I was thinking of this more as feedback to the city council and staff for making actual decisions where it would be implemented and then be subject to litigation and so on. And for that, I would think that I worry about it being so open-ended, but as guidelines for the commissions and so on, it's excellent.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly. It's meant to be a guideline for commissions, definitely not kind of a legally defensible thing. And
Although I do hope that the city council would pay attention to it.
yeah. There was one more thing I was going to add to that, and now I've lost it. I just wanted to say, I keep saying you all because this is my last commission meeting, so I'm like handing it over to you all to do with whatever you need to do with it in the future. Just wanted to point that out.
I noticed that. Change of tense that you're raising there. But this is, what an amazing piece of work to leave the commission with too. So I forgot to give you my own praise for it too, which is, I so appreciate the work that you put into this. It's literally been like years in the making, and I think it's just going to be incredibly useful. And thank you too for getting us to kind of more strictly define, what purpose this would serve as well, Jim. I think that's really something I should have touched on at the beginning. But Commissioner Gamache, would you like to add, or can we go back to you, and if you've got any comments you'd like to share?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so we have a document from the City Council that was generated when we first got the commission together, and so I would like to see how this relates to those founding documents, and if we can draft this in a way that shows how it's related, or how I think there's some questions that we should be considering that come from those documents that maybe should be added to this as well, potentially, to make this more complete. I think that's my only suggestion there, and yeah, those are the ones right there, yeah. So, I really liked these the way this was drafted. I liked these purposes, and I just like to see these get expanded into actionable questions. And I think a lot of these are present here in this draft, and so it'd be nice to see how that's related. And that's, I guess, my comment there. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. And that was the purpose of the points and the purpose of the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission. So kind of our charter. So you'd like to see those better reflected or integrated within this.
Yeah, ideally, if we just had one document that kind of really gave us a perspective on how we're doing. From my perspective, I think it's important to have a self-evaluation system as a commission to know that we're doing a good job as a commission. So that was really, I think, one of the big motivators for me to have this sort of framework, is so that the commission knows that they're on track within themselves. So I'm not entirely sure. I think something can happen with this document and this document so that we can have that more actionable process evaluation sort of document that we might need. And I also agree that I think the City Council, whatever we produce, we could check in with the City Council and see what their thoughts are on as well, and of course the staff. And we can make that part of that project.
Thank you. That's a great point. I hadn't really considered specifically integrating those. So I kind of see maybe two options to my eyes of how we could proceed. I think what we did last meeting was say we took this as a draft where it was, had identified a couple key places to change or key kind of places for improvement, and then came back in this meeting to discuss that. We could do something similar. We could say, we identified that we want to integrate those points. We identify a couple commissioners to work on that, and we go from and that's kind of where we leave at this meeting. I think alternatively, we could also adopt the framework as it is at this time, knowing that it is going to be a living document and that we want to kind of periodically improve it. But then also with 2 new commissioners in our next meeting, we could say, let's immediately create a subcommittee that's going to work to integrate with that kind of limited task of take this framework that we just adopted this time and integrate those purposes more directly into it. That would allow kind of, a couple of new commissioners to, as Kira and Michelle sort of move off the project, a couple of new commissioners could take ownership of it. Or I'm sure there's 3, 4, 5 other options that we could approach it with. But I agree that that's a great idea to try to get that purpose a little bit more directly in there. So, but yeah, just a couple ideas. If that doesn't sound quite right to folks, we can take it a different direction.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts there. So I do like the idea of if we are gonna take more action on this, giving our new commissioners an opportunity to chime in on it at our next meeting, which I actually think won't be till August, so it would be a little bit of a gap there, but I like having that larger group with the opportunity to chime in on it. And with regards to kind of the relationship between this document and our authorizing resolution, I do think that they are distinct documents that serve distinct purposes. And I think the authorizing resolution is what defines our topics of concern, right? The things that we are tasked with as a commission with providing advice on for the council. And I think that this environmental justice framework gives us another lens through which we look at those topics. And so I definitely agree that the more we can connect them, the better, but I do think of this as what are we looking, the resolution is what are we looking at, and the environmental justice framework is how are we looking at it. And so I think that's the key distinction there for me, and maybe there's a way to integrate those in that way, but I don't think we should lose that in that exercise. And so with that in mind, yeah, I'm very open to bringing this back up at another meeting and having it as a living document, and having it be something that we kind of periodically come back to and modify and improve and build upon. That said, I think it's in a really strong place right now, and I'd be very interested in getting council's input before we put more time into it. Because I think getting that feedback before we go, do more, make sure we're, again, all pulling in the same direction. So that would be my thought right now, at least.
Can I add a question whenever it's ready?
I just wanted to add something. My thought is to have a way of assessing whether we've met the founding, what would you call this?
Authorizing resolution.
The authorizing resolution. So are we successfully meeting the purposes? And having a simple, and it doesn't have to be that simple, but like just having a sense of whether we've actually met the needs of this authorizing resolution. And then having that self-evaluation process for ourselves is the thought, or my thought.
Michelle, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to answer that too, and I'd say, I think that's a great idea to have an assessment of how you're doing. You might want to think about doing that kind of before you get started, or at least early on when you get started, so that you kind of have those goals to work towards, you know what I mean? But I also wanted to say, Stan, at one of the last meetings at least, you said you were going to be bringing, how do we take things to council directions? Do we have that yet?
Go ahead. They have that. So, no, we have not had that presentation. We do have it though. So at the next meeting, we'll definitely bring that forward.
And just to kind of add to that, this particular item is a little bit unique because it originated well before some of those new protocols. And so I just had a good conversation with our city clerk today about that. So as you think about this item, don't be concerned about those new and different protocols for now, okay? And at some point, if I can add a couple of comments, but I don't want to interrupt your deliberations.
Thank you. I think we have just a couple more commission comments, and then, yeah, we'll go to from council too. Jim?
I just wanted to add in our discussion of what we do with this. I mean, certainly it becomes an important part of our deliberation, but I hope it gets out to the other commissions. But beyond that, at our last meeting, I think it was our last meeting when it was all the different commissions together, dealing with the general plan, we were recommending that environmental justice be incorporated in the development of the general plan. And I hope that this will serve a useful impetus for that and a framework for how the general plan incorporates environmental justice in all the different elements of that. So I think that's a more immediate and broader application of this than just we talk about it and the commissions talk about it.
Thank you. And yeah, Council Councilmember Noble, would you like to?
Thank you for that, and my apologies for not being at your May meeting, because I was at the meeting probably well over a year ago when you and Kara first introduced this item, and so thank you for revisiting it. So I'm obviously, what you decide to do is your prerogative, but I just want to offer you a couple of thoughts, you know, as a council member, in terms of what will make it the most impactful, what will make it the most actionable for council if you do send it up to council. And the first thing I would say is if you were to decide tonight to move it up to council, the more context you give us, the better. And by that I mean really helping council understand how you recommend it be used. Because I'm hearing some very interesting ideas tonight. One is it's kind of a lens through which this commission would look as you make any decisions. I'm also hearing that it could be used much more broadly. It could be integrated into the environmental justice elements of the general plan, which from my personal perspective, I think is a great idea, you know, and other uses. So the more you give us to work with and understand what you mean, because otherwise I fear we'll come back with a lot of questions. So the more you can tell us what you're thinking, the better. I'm hearing it here, but the more you can reflect it in your motion, that's all the better. And then just one other point, Michelle, you asked a little bit about the general plan, and right now, council has not actually committed to whether, we all want environmental justice to be fully embraced by our new general plan update, but we have not agreed on whether the environmental justice element will be a separate sort of component of the plan, or whether it will be interspersed with the various other elements, or kind of a hybrid where you have a standalone environmental justice element, and then it's also integrated into the various components, land use, circulation, etc. I see the document that you have prepared here as being really helpful at what I would call the front end of the general plan process, and that's where we are now. So I would suggest that it would be more impactful if you ask that it be transmitted to those who are working on the general plan now, rather than reacting to what's developed. That's my suggestion. Obviously your call, but that's how I think you will have more of an impact. Because that process is very much in the early stages of information gathering right now, and this would be extremely useful information for those who are working on that to have. I'm not sure who your two designees are. You'll be appointing at some point two designees to work on the general plan. Have they done that yet?
No.
Okay. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Yeah, I just had a thought. Thank you, Donna. Another thought is to share whatever framework process we're talking about to the other commissions, to ask them potentially what they would like us to look at as well, because if they're going to have some sense of what climate environmental justice means to them in terms of their purview. So we don't want to overlap too much. We don't want to do work that they're doing, but we do want them to let us know what we should focus on in lieu of what they're focusing on. And so I think that's also a conversation that needs to happen across commissions. And so it sounds like a much bigger project, but I'm ready to think about how we might propose a motion to define the scope of it and consider the next steps of how we proceed.
I guess the only thing I would add is I definitely want other commissions to buy into this, but if the process is, let's hand it over to the staff and the council members who are working on the EJ element right now, so that they can sort of think about it and integrate it and use the ideas in it, then maybe that's an opportunity then when whatever they sort of develop themselves becomes public, that would be an opportunity that all commissions could also give comment and talk about how it should be incorporated within their own commissions. I don't know. Because otherwise we get in this cycle of like, do we take it to commissions first and then council, or council, then commissions, and it's, which is where we've already been a few times in this process and not really known the best way to go. I think that, I think from what I'm hearing from Councilmember Neville is that we should probably do this sooner than later, even if it's not perfect. That would be my thing.
Let me slightly rephrase what Michelle is saying. Our charge from City Council is that we're responsible for looking at environmental justice. So I think that we're in a position where we can forward this document to the commissions and for general, the general plan and so on, but also acknowledge that it's a living document and that we welcome feedback from other commissions and so on, but that we are in a position where we could start moving ahead right now. And I think I agree with Donna's notion that time is of the essence to get this in for the general plan right now.
Yeah, I certainly concur with what Jim has just said, that, we need to benefit from your expertise and your advice, and it sounds like a lot of work has gone into this over a long period of time, and we've just been advised to get going with it, and I think we should act on that.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that we should move this to council pretty quickly here. I'm even reticent necessarily because we have the July recess to wait another meeting to do that. And with regards to dialogue with the other commissions, I like that idea. I always think there's value in that. At the same time, I'm cautious of getting bogged down in that cycle. In my mind, not that every commission may have good feedback on this, but I would think that human relations and social services are probably the two most topical for this. And at the same time, I would just emphasize, while environmental justice spills over on everything that the city does in certain ways, right? We are the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission. So I think it's reasonable for us to take some ownership of this and say, hey, this is what we think the framework should look like and where we think we should start. We welcome input. We want to hear from council, but I think we should sort of forge ahead with this rather than feel like we have to check in with all those other commissions first. And yeah, I think we actually, I don't know if Kira or Michelle, you guys had a crystal ball or something, because it is very prescient that we are now planning for a general plan that has an EJ element, or is going to have EJ, sprinkled throughout all of the other elements, and you all have started on this within the last year, and we are now the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission, right? Like, all of these things have kind of swirled together in a very interesting way that I think says, hey, this is, let's move forward with this.
I agree. The only thing I would add is a lot of commissions actually have EJ, including like Transportation Commission and bicycling, all of these things have a huge impact on people that otherwise are burdened. I mean, when we go from having a bus stop in a neighborhood of people that don't have a lot of cars to having it removed, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, fully recognize that was not exclusively social services and human relations, but those would be the places I might consider starting in terms of getting feedback. That was kind of my initial thought there, but I appreciate that.
Maybe this is naive of me, but I kind of think we can sort of do it all here. I think with looking at this as a living document, I think there's a path here where we adopt it. We adopt the document today. We send it to the council with some suggestions on how we think it can work. It can kind of benefit their work and how we're going to use it, and then also figure out a way to kind of shop it around to the other commissions and solicit their input. I think it would be really effective, for instance, for members of our commission or subcommittee in our commission to go to some of those commission meetings during public comment, bring this forward, give them a little primer and solicit some input. And I think we can kind of do all of those things, and just adopting it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's, or isn't going to be the end of the road here. I think the act of adopting it, though, is really going to inform our work going forward on projects, and as we've heard, can really help the council understand where we're coming from. with that motion needing, I guess, some choice language on, or some effective language on, you know, we're going to use this for one purpose. What do we think? How do we wish the council to look at it? I think we can get there though.
Yeah, so I wrote two possible motions on how to work with this document. The first one is to forward this document for consideration to council and other commissions to allow them to consider how to best implement it for their own purposes. And the second one is to use this as a basis for the development of an assessment of how well we are meeting our authorizing resolutions.
So I have a few thoughts, but Stan, I think you have a process.
Yeah, I would just suggest, as Councilmember Neville mentioned, so from a perspective of if you wanted to go to other commissions, you wanted to have those types of activities, I would say that's a request through council as one of the things, one of the objectives of putting this in front of council, for council to say, yes, we feel that's appropriate use of time or no. So that's all my suggestion would be.
I'm mindful of Donna's suggestion that it would be more impactful if we have some sort of context, and I'm not sure how extensive. I'm wondering, in my mind, if it would just be a one-paragraph statement about the history and what we've been working on, and perhaps you could draft a one-paragraph thing as part of sending this on to council. Just a thought.
Yes, and you probably got some, sorry about that. Jacob, you probably have some thoughts. I know you're really good about pulling this stuff together, but I guess my thought would be, number one, we make a motion, and I'm happy to make a motion, that the Climate and Environmental Justice Committee adopt this framework as a way of looking at their work moving forward. That would just be simple. And then have another one that, and maybe more than another one, another one that would say we are sending this to council to integrate into their environmental justice element considerations, and we would like to see it integrated into all commissions, and would like direction on doing that, I guess, something to that effect.
Yeah, I agree with multiple motions, and one, adopting this for our commission is very clean. I like that, and I think that makes me go to your point, Jacob. Yeah, and I think whatever we send to council needs to either have very direct questions or very direct recommendations that we'd like them to, you know, either adopt or modify to their, you know, as appropriate, and then, you know, move forward with. I think we need to be really explicit about that. And, you know, you can have bullets in there. Here's the things we're asking. Here are the things we're recommending happen specifically with this document from, you know, this point forward with council's blessing.
Speaking from experience, simpler motions are a lot easier to track. Yeah, but I think
Thank you.
I think we can still hit all these points that Commissioner Gamache raised. But Michelle, can I ask you, since you put so much work in this, would you like to propose a motion?
I would. I'd like to propose a motion that the Climate and Environmental Justice Commission adopt this environmental justice and equity framework for use in their efforts.
Would anyone like a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. And it's unanimous.
And Kara couldn't be here tonight, but I know she's jumping for joy.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, so that's number one. Let's go on to number two. Commissioner, would anyone like to offer another one, or Commissioner Gamache, I know you had a couple ideas.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to use this document that we've just adopted as a basis for the development of an assessment of how well we are meeting our authorizing resolutions. A self-assessment.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So I wonder if or I guess I'm asking myself if if we would like to do this through a motion, or if we would like to create maybe a subcommittee to work on this. So I think the motion would lead us to create a subcommittee. So, I think 6 of one and half dozen of another. The motion would be, a statement of our purpose, but I think we could also
So we're saying to phrase it as, the motion is to develop a subcommittee around this document? No, I don't know how to say it.
yeah.
If I might add something, I mean, certainly my hesitation is, I don't see where the evaluation part is. And so I think as you're suggesting, I think some work in a subcommittee to come up with, and how do you take this and turn it into what are the points that you're looking at to evaluate yourselves? And I don't think we're there yet, but I think we all would like to see that as an ultimate step.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it might be a little bit early, and I think it would be nice if you have your new commissioners in place too, because maybe you could adopt that subcommittee all in one swoop too, once they're here.
So maybe we should do a motion to add this to a future agenda to discuss generating it.
I don't necessarily think we need a motion for that, but I think during the long-range calendar portion of this, we could have that be a meeting in our, or item in our August commission.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Thanks for talking that through.
So a question, as I understand it, we're not meeting in July, and so if we don't tonight say something about forwarding it to city council, it's going to be a little bit late to get involved with the general plan and so on.
Yeah, I think we should still entertain a motion tonight to pass this to council, and I'm gonna admittedly need help wordsmithing these things, but I think there's kind of three main questions or main points we want to get input from council on. Are there any modifications they'd like to see to this framework to kind of align with their understanding and priorities regarding environmental justice? And, I think I'm interested in if we should stay, we've adopted that we want to use this, and I think the other question is, how can we present this to other commissions? How would council like us to present this to other commissions for consideration during their deliberations and decision-making processes? I feel like those are kind of the two main things we're looking for in council, or maybe there's others. I'm very open to feedback on that, but I feel like if we can kind of distill it down to a couple asks, then we can wordsmith hey, how are we transmitting it around that? But
So I guess in my view, the first point that you're making, that we want to know their way of integrating this, or I can't remember how you phrase it, something about what they think about whether this meets their criteria.
Yeah.
I guess I would say that my thinking is more like we are integrating it with the public's criteria. So I'd like to see it be a document published and be brought publicly so that public comment can be taken, right? So that it can be really vetted and changed in a way that meets our community, rather than just leaving it in the hands of staff or council.
So going in front of council, part of it would be on a public agenda, so there would be opportunity for public comment.
Right. So I guess for me, it would be more of a motion to send this framework to the city council and use it as a framework that could be integrated into the environmental justice plan, and to pass this framework on to other commissions for their consideration.
I second that.
Could we write it more as like a memo? Could we drafted something like we have recently adopted this document as a climate and as a commission, and we would like to forward it to the council and the other commissions for their consideration. Something like that.
So part of when you make a motion to put something in front of council, staff would prepare basically a staff report associated with that motion and whatever documentation was part of it. Part of that is so staff has the ability to provide input for council consideration. Also though, in some instances, we have in the past worked with the chair to ensure that the tee-up for that item and that information is accurate to what the commission's intent was as well. So I would suggest that's probably a way for us to get there in this case too.
Well, I think that suggests going back to what Michelle originally said, that was pretty simple and straightforward.
Yeah, that sounds good, and I think we already have a second from Commissioner Kramer, so I think we can move to a vote unless folks would like to hear the motion restated.
I would like to hear it one more time.
Yeah.
And also if anybody has more discussion or a friendly amendment or anything like that too, definitely open to all that. Hopefully you caught what I said.
I took a couple minutes here, I mean,
Jacob's pretty amazing at this, so I think we're gonna let him have the first crack.
I don't think I caught it quite right though, so you'll have to help me, but request the council to, I have wordsmithed a little bit, request the council to agendize this item and consider using our environmental justice and equity framework as something for the general plan.
How about a citywide framework for considering environmental justice in decision making? Commissions, departments, that feels like it's pretty comprehensive and they can whittle it down from there.
I appreciate that, and I really don't want to dictate how you do this, but the more precision you give council, and if you give us something that broad, I think it's going to engender a lot of questions. That's just my thought. And maybe where you want to go, and if you are going to go there, do at least an illustrative list of examples, such as inclusion in the general plan, environmental justice element, consideration when adopting a development, approving a development project or whatever, just so that we don't keep circling back to you with a lot of questions, and make it to work and have as much impact as it can, as quickly as it can.
So maybe a potential is, you've brought up 2 or 3 focused areas tonight. Maybe focus on those for now, and then, part of it is, we know we're gonna talk about it again moving forward, right? So maybe there are other items that come up that you put forth at that point after you've done it, but I think tying it into the general plan, that's certainly a key for tonight, and then maybe there's 1 or 2 others, that way council's not, overwhelmed is not the right word, but, they're focused on what you feel is most critical at this point in time too. But again, it's your.
Yeah, I guess to me it would be, number 1, integrated into the EJ plan for the general plan. The EJ element, for the general plan. And number 2 would be to get it to the commissions for consideration. And I don't know if we need to give a list of the commissions, but I would probably list them all, so I'm not sure. I mean, I could give examples of why, probably for all of them, but I don't know if that's necessarily helpful.
I think I do want to get to the other commissions, but I think that's kind of a second or third motion. I guess,
It could
first.
be, yeah, it could be separate.
So this one would be request council to agendize this item and consider using this, using our framework as a framework for developing the environmental justice component of the general plan.
Element.
Well, to be determined,
Oh,
whether it's an element or it's crosswalk, so. But it ties it to that specific general plan. If element seems like, or if environmental justice element seems like a better way to phrase it.
I think element is the word, and it doesn't matter whether it's integrated or a separate element. Either way, it's called an element.
And then, Michelle, that meets what you were intending with your motion.
I think the only bit we could get more clear on is to get it to the specific people who are working on that environmental justice element to integrate it back to commissions, which would be separate from actually going to the other commissions and kind of promoting it, if you will. Does that make sense?
Sure. That's a great suggestion. I'm getting feedback here. So, there's going to be a working group basically put together, which will have an item to select 2 from this commission. There's 2 from others. So maybe the suggestion is this framework council authorizes this framework to go to that committee or commission, task force, I don't know exactly what we're calling.
I like that.
Instead of all the committees, to your point, that's different than the normal commissions. So as part of incorporating it into the general plan, you give it to this commission for consideration. Good luck with that, Jake.
Is it possible just to say something like, a motion to forward this framework for suggested use in the general plan, commissions, and council decision-making?
Well, I would say that goes beyond what Michelle originally had put forth that was seconded. So at this point, we're just trying to nail down that.
Okay.
And then we can go to different.
Yeah, I'd agree that that sounds separate and it sounds a little bit more final. I think I would love to have this be more publicly vetted before it goes final, if you will. Does that make sense? And so by agendizing it, it goes public.
So requesting that City Council agendize this item and consider using our framework as a framework for developing the environmental justice element of the general plan, and that the framework is sent to the yet to be named commission working group on the general plan.
I'll second that.
Well, you already did.
I'm seconding it for a second time.
So I think that's a solid one for what was intended here, and then if you want to take discussion or vote on that, then we could move on to others.
Yeah, I just wanted any discussion or questions, clarifying comments.
I like where we landed.
Excellent. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And it's unanimous, excellent. All right, and I do have an eye on the time, so it's, we're a little bit past 7 now, but we had discussed a third motion, potentially around direction for commissions. Does anyone want to take a crack at proposing a way forward there, or some direction we'd like to kind of, again, be asking council how we can get this in front of commissions?
Well, I think one of the values of this document is that it gives people a lot to think about, and the sooner they start thinking about those things, the better. Whether they agree to adopt it fully or in parts or whatever, that could be part of another process later in terms of the commissions or the general plan. So that's kind of my thought. Is it possible to send this out for just awareness that it exists and that we've adopted it? That's big enough. And then we can also say we're working on suggestions for implementation, maybe, or suggestions for how this, in the future as we have a subcommittee around it or whatever, we can propose more specific things. But maybe just like giving them notice and letting them know that this exists, and if they want to take initiative about it, they can, because it's very solid as it is. I don't know, those are my thoughts about that.
Thank you. So I'm wondering if we could do like a motion around like requesting the council to notify other commissions of our adoption of this framework and solicit input from other commissions on the framework.
I like that because I think it's requesting council basically push out to those commissions, we'd like you to consider this. And I think that also, I know we don't, it aligns with like what the process was looking like, or at least laid out in
Plus,
discussion.
it does elicit that we want feedback anyway, so that takes care of that, yeah.
Agreed, I like it.
All right, I'll move then that we request council to notify other commissions of our adoption of this framework and solicit input from other commissions on the framework itself.
I'll second that.
And make a friendly, I guess it's a friendly amendment, reactions and feedback? I mean, I just wonder if it,
Did you use the word feedback?
did,
Michelle has taught me that feedback is not the most like actionable,
Right.
like feedback in like, you're gonna tell me something.
You're gonna retell me what I told you.
Yeah.
That's
And so
feedback.
So she taught me that like a year ago, and so now I use input instead of feedback, so that it's clear that they can tell us, hey, on line 3, I don't really like the way that you said that, and that's kind of the level, you know. It's implicit, it's just verbiage kind of thing, but yeah, but I do like the reaction part though, so I would.
because I listened to you, I just thought reaction was really what we're seeking.
So it would be reactions and input.
And maybe instead of reactions, a response?
Is that
Their
correct?
response?
It has to come back.
Yeah.
Or words.
I like
I
it.
suspect we don't have to worry too much about this. I'm quite confident that the commission will be immediately poised to give us input.
I think you've got a point there. Okay, so it's response and input from the other commissions on the framework. So I think I've got a second. I think I have a second on that. So I do appreciate it. Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And it's unanimous again. All right. So I think those are the three items we initially talked about. But any other commissioners, do you have any other thoughts or motions you'd like us to discuss before we close this item?
Not a motion, but I certainly want to thank Michelle for all of her work on this. Been one of the few times where I've actually seen work like that come to fruition and a product.
Thank you so much, and just huge shout out to Kira for helping make it happen too. Kira is awesome. She's unfortunately leaving our community right now, but she was instrumental in getting this done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congratulations. So much work went into this. Excellent. So we'll close this item. Thank you all so much. That was really great. I'm so happy that is adopted, and looking forward to further discussions on it. So now we'll move to the long-range calendar item. Let me just ask. I guess we will have a moment for public comment. If any members of the future commission want to talk about our long-range calendar here too. But before we do that, Stan, let me just open it up to you, and we can talk this through.
Sure, so July, no meeting in alignment with council recess. So August, we have the water quality annual report, so that's a report that the NRC would be familiar with. We go to them every year with that. That's part of a public requirement that we do, so that'll be that meeting. Also potentially for August, or subject to this August, September, we have the 3 items. The 2 commissioners that you would like to see moved on to this committee for the general plan, we'll put that on the agenda. Council commission process update on how to bring things from a commission forward to council. We'll have that presentation for the new commission, if you will, with Sarah and Jessica. And then sounds like a subcommittee related to the framework. Whether that's August or September, we can chat as we get closer to that meeting. Don't want to pack it too full, depending on the weight of the topics. That's what I heard this evening.
Yeah, that's tracking for me. Any other commissioners?
I also wanted to consider adding nothing to the agenda, and that's a discussion on moving the commission meeting not on the last Monday of the month, because if we look at how many meetings we missed because it's the last Monday, it might not be, if we move it to a different Monday, we might end up having more of them because of holidays and other things. So I thought maybe we should look at that and see if moving it to a different time would work to create more meetings.
That's at the pleasure. I mean, we can look certainly that now that every meeting is in chambers, very restrictive on trying to find a different day that's a regular, but we certainly can ponder that. Staff can look at that and then potentially with the chair and vice chair, see if there are options that you might want to convey forward.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good to me. yeah, thank you. If we can get a little bit more regular of a schedule, that would be great. So it'd be much appreciated. Any other items from commissioners that you've heard that you'd like to make sure get onto the long-range calendar at this point?
I guess this is maybe more of a question, but are we gonna get sort of a specific direction of like, hey, it's now time to assign people to the general plan commission? Is that do it whenever we're ready?
So I think we'll go ahead and tee that up for August, when we have the new commission seated. So yeah, I absolutely think that'll be one of the items for the August meeting.
Good.
Thank you. And I apologize. I did promise to open some opportunity for public comment on this item too. If any members of the public would like to come up and speak on the long-range calendar in particular, we can do so now.
Hi, I haven't been following it very closely, but I see we have an intense discussion about environmental justice. Environmental justice is the application of the impacts. Is any commission studying the environmental impact, the collectiveness of the impact of the general plan? I just don't know. I just wonder that this environmental justice is assuming all the attention that the NRC used to basically focus on the environment, and because climate change is pretty important. It's, when there was a resolution about the ceasefire in Israel-Gaza about 18 months ago, I made a comment. I said, yes, we need to basically resolve this thing here. But the Middle East will not be inhabitable at the end of the century because of climate change. So we need to squabble. We need to figure out the squabble, but it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the environment, on the Titanic, unless you dig where the bigger issue. I just don't know whether any commission is focusing on the environment and the NRC. Was the commission that used to focus on it? Is anyone taking up that focus? Thank you for listening. Thank you for your service.
Could I comment on that a little bit? I think that was part of what I was seeing in terms of creating alignment between that document and our authorizing resolutions, because our authorizing resolutions looks like a larger purview, and that this document is necessary. I think it's heavily purpose B, and there might be other things to also flesh out as we go forward.
Yeah, in some ways, I might even point out that climate is our first name of our committee, and that's exactly what we're here for, is to consider all of the impacts of environmental impacts, I'd say, on our community as a whole. Environmental justice is kind of different, and it's also something we need to consider.
Thank you. But this, I am thinking too, I'm looking at our annual updates and reviews. We have solid waste, integrated pest management, water quality, state of the urban forest. I'm not sure if there's a page 2 on here, but we haven't yet normalized or standardized kind of an annual or periodic review of implementation of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And sort of like, I think that is going to be integrated into the general plan. I think the folks from this commission who are working on the general plan are going to be taking that forward as well. But I think there's opportunity there for the commission as a whole to be finding a way to dive into the CAM a little bit more frequently and meaningfully. And so looking over at like September, October, November, I think some of those meetings look light enough that we might be able, if we can come up with a specific ask for what we would like to discuss with staff, perhaps we could find a way to do some sort of CAP review during those times.
Sure, so there are regular CAP updates both for council and the commission. We are in the middle of refilling the position that Carrie retired from. That's nearing completion. I hope to have someone in background hopefully in the next week or two. So I think looking toward, honestly, probably the November timeframe would probably be a good time where that person would be up to speed and ready to bring forth some information.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, if we can tentatively schedule that for November, if other commissioners would like that as well, I think that would be a great. That'll hold us to it, and we'll see what we get. Well, thank you all so much. not seeing any further comments on this item, so we'll close this item, and that will do it for today's meeting.
We adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Michelle,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kira's not here.
I know, such a bummer. I got her to help me work on it, but she was like, I'm moving right now.
In a movie.
Yeah.
Of course.
Central